Good Tuesday again to everybody. Income 731. Welcome back to week 5 and our review of your readings and discussions from week 4. So first and foremost, I think in the first video I may have said COM 751, which there isn't a COM 751, at least for this semester. So if I did, you got the right video, but it's got a knuckleheaded instructor. Sorry about that. Okay, let's take a look at the readings from Tapscott and Williams, macroeconomics, and the questions and your answers there too. All right, see what we can add. Question number 1, Tapscott and Williams ask the question, why should the technology data and risk assessment models that are used to value products be kept hidden from the public? When we say value products, what we mean is financial valuations, say like how much is an investment worth and how is that value determined? How much is a mortgage-backed security worth and how is that determined, et cetera, et cetera? Has this problem been fixed today, or are we still at risk for another major world financial meltdown like we experienced in 2008? We're speaking specifically here of the so-called subprime mortgage crisis. And the reason that I say so-called is the crisis was not with subprime mortgages. Excuse me. The crisis came with financial institutions that were over leveraged. Now that's a financial term. And what that means is that they had their debt to asset ratio was really high. Now, most financial institutions, and this is even your local bank, they will have more money out in circulation, that is loaned out, than they actually have money in the bank, especially in the vault, because we deal significantly now with digital currency, and financial institutions spend less and less time with actual physical money, like the paper stuff. Okay. So to say financial institution is highly leveraged or over leveraged means that the amount of debt that it's holding, loans that it is sent out, is significantly higher than its assets, meaning that if something happens to the debt that's owed to it, there's the payments coming in. If the revenue stream from the payments can't come in, then the institution itself can't make the payments on debts that it holds, because financial institutions make money in really two ways. Number one, three ways. Number one is through the interest that's applied to the debt that goes out, the fees that are applied to the services to you. So whether you're buying stock or putting your money in a checking account, or you have a credit card with, MasterCard or Citibank or whatever. Okay. And then the investment of monies that the institution makes by borrowing it. So the institution is sending out money to you, charging you fees for that transaction. If you've gotten a house, you know exactly how this works, even though, I've had several houses thus far in my life, and every time I bought one, I go, wait a minute. So I have to pay a fee to you so you can lend me money that I pay back at interest. Why is this exactly? Because they say so. So lending the money out to you, the fees on lending the money, and then taking the revenue stream that comes in from the money that is lent and making payments on money that they borrow to pursue investments. And if the money stops coming in, the available monies that go out to make the payments on their investments declines, and they get into serious trouble. And this is what happened in 2008, that major banking and investment institutions had lent out so much money and were pursuing some high risk investments that they owed money on. And when the money stopped coming in from mortgages that they were investing in, and you might say, how do you invest in a mortgage? From the mortgages that they had invested in, they couldn't make their payments out. And some of them actually, some of the institutions collapsed. Lehman Brothers just disappeared. And the other ones were saved by just a massive billion and billions of dollars check from you and me, the taxpayer, that the government gave them, saying, well, these investment institutions are too big to fail, is the term they used, meaning if they collapse, the collateral, the damage that would, like a shockwave that go out through the rest of the economy, would be so severe that the pain felt by Joe Schmo and Jane Doe citizen, you and me, would be so much greater than the pain that we're going to feel by giving them a big chunk of money. That's the way it works. All right. So the question is, should there be more transparency? Well, maybe there should. But is there going to be more transparency? Not really. And before you say, well, it's those big investment banks and they're hiding things from us, and part of that's true, there are some other factors that, Tapscott and William just don't seem to take into account when they write this. And Charles, you put your finger right on it. Good morning, everyone. Technology data risk assessment used to value products are kept hidden from the public because of the proprietary rights of the financial firms. Boom, baby. That's one sentence and you hit the nail right on the head. Whether we like it or not, financial firms, just like other companies, have a right to their intellectual property. And it's interesting, in U.S. corporate law, did you know that corporations are given and afforded the same rights as individual citizens? In fact, when there's in making contracts, or if there's a contract dispute and there's a litigation, the corporation is represented as if it were a person. And you might be saying, well, that's kind of weird. Why is that? Because one of the foundational principles of this country is a right to control assets, whether that's real property, like, well, there's my chunk of land, my intellectual property. Here's the process by which I put the 7 herbs and spices in and make the fried chicken, Kentucky Fried Chicken. So ideas or process. This is how we make the super glue that, somebody can stick on their helmet and hang from a steel beam, and we don't have to tell you. All of those you have a right to as a citizen. And you might be saying, well, that's kind of weird. Why is that? Well, those who put together this country understood very well. And in this respect, they're right. They were correct. That the principal way in which power structures, and that can be governments, whether they're monarchies or not, or individuals, slave owners, the principal way that power structures control individuals and groups of individuals is by controlling their means, meaning the people who are controlled, their means of economic well-being. So if I can keep you from having anything that's yours, whether it's the home that you live in or the full profit from the product of the thing that you produce, I can control you. Now, this is different, sorry for the tangent here, but this is different than capitalism, because in capitalism, there's a negotiated agreement. I'm trading the thing that I own, my labor, for the thing that the supplier owns, capital, meaning cash. I'm giving my labor for the cash. That's the agreement. That's the trade. So what I own, what I have a right to, is my labor, the energy and my time. That's mine. And I have a right to negotiate for it. And I enter into a contract and say, this is how much I'm willing to accept in exchange for that. And I'm not going to expect the product. I don't have to go home if I work at Kentucky Fried Chicken, and I did when I was a teenager, I don't expect to go home with a a share of the chicken that's that's fried that evening. The agreement is my labor, their money. All right, so it's an exchange. And without the ability to control what belongs to you, or even the recognition that things belong to you, you don't have autonomy, you don't have freedom. So there's a teeny bit of naivete on the part of your authors to say, well, why aren't they sharing it? Back to you, Charles. Firms do this to make money before cash. They were minting money. However, the financial firms were taking short-term views, raking in the money now, despite knowing that long-term prospects for the bundled mortgages were not good. And that's only partially true, Charles. That there was at the heart of what caused the crash. And there's a very human tendency. So this is not the product of a particular industry or just unbridled greed. There was an assumption that economically everything that had been happening, which was a very good economy, would continue to happen into the future. That's sometimes referred to as a hot hand fallacy, meaning, if a basketball player is shooting shots, the basketball player is making the shots, then the assumption is that every time the basketball player shoots the ball, the shot will be made. Okay, that's not true. And in the 1990s and into 2000s, there was an assumption about the economy that it was just going to keep going and going and going. And then 9/11 happened, and that began a global contraction of the economy, which made it more and more difficult for people to make good on these payments on their mortgages. And this sort of started things, and down it went from there. Okay. Government incentivized these same loans with questionable policies, and that's true. That's another part of the picture that often gets left out. That banks, look here, folks. Whether we're dealing with the application of certain technologies in the operation of these institutions, whether it's financial or otherwise, or the communication process that comes about because of that, bear this fundamental truth in mind. Businesses are in business for business. That's it. So linguistically, don't get sucked into the, you're our friends and family. And as a communication scholar, I have to tell you that really grates on me when I walk through somewhere and they start talking about family. I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty sure that my family doesn't charge me money to say get something out of the refrigerator when I come home. But if I want anything to eat here, you do. So, watch out for that kind of language. The business of business is business. It's not there to be your family. It's not there to be your friend. It's there to provide a product or a service for a fee. They're exchanging their stuff for your stuff. Your stuff is the money. Their stuff is the thing. That's it. And they, banks are the same way. They're like, hey, we don't want to lend money to people we don't think are going to be able to pay it back. Well, in the 90s, there was a spotlight on this very fundamental reality, and people were saying, well, that's not fair. That targets certain communities more than others. Okay. And so the federal government stepped in and said, you know what, mortgage lenders, if you lend money to borrowers who are at higher and higher risk of not being able to pay you, if they can't pay you, the federal government, will pay you. Now you might be saying, well, that's equitable. Okay. On in terms of a policy implication, what it also does is it really helps spur the economy, because the building of homes is a key economic driver. It's a key component of the economic engine, because when homes are being built, presumably to fill the demand of people that are borrowing money to buy, this moves goods around, this moves services around, this provides jobs. Services spring up when there are subdivisions that are created. You want to have a fast food place, you're going to build a school, then you're going to have a supermarket, and then you got to have a fire department. And so it becomes almost like a combustion chamber in the economic engine that has a positive effect economically that goes out. So it wasn't a mere. Some people say, well, it was a political trick to try to pull in votes from marginalized communities. Not entirely. And by the by, that's part of the problem that we're having right now with our economy, and that is interest rates to borrow money to buy houses are so bloody ridiculously high. People aren't buying houses, and when people aren't buying houses, other people aren't building houses, and that part of the economic engine cools off and goes quiet, and that's bad for the economy at large. All right, but back to you. Little message in economics. Back to you, Charles. As a result, there were both corporate and political reasons to keep the process hidden from the public. In fact, financial firms specifically made it difficult to understand what they're doing with the building of subprime mortgages to protect their profit models at the time. The most critical result, however, is the loss and trust of the confidence of the financial system. Tapscott and Williams assumed that this lack of transparency is the problem, comparing it to Canadian model of banks maintaining mortgages on their books, which is really the old American model. Think George Bailey, that is in Jimmy Stewart in It's a Wonderful Life, the bank run scene. Okay, excellent, Charles, all the way around, because we're not Canada, and we have very, very different laws concerning property and intellectual property. Do I think it will change? No, I don't. I mean, maybe around the edges, but substantively, no. And as you point out, Charles, that they, if you've ever dabbled in the financial sector, you know exactly what Charles is talking about here, that the language that they use is by design confusing. But let me encourage you, don't, I mean, it's like internet technology. Don't get thrown off by people that clearly could have used a plain English speaker in the room when they were coming up with the names for, the various elements that are a part of the technology of the process. Just learn it. I mean, you as an English speaker, you adopt foreign words all the time. You don't say ballet, you say ballet. There's no silent T in the English language. Okay. So same thing, whether it's a financial institution or stuff online. I mean, for crying out loud, as the internet was taking shape, I mean, I'm hard pressed to believe, really, that there isn't a shorter, more direct, and clearer term to say, hey, this string of numbers and letters is going to be the address, the place at which the information is parked. Why couldn't we have just used address for that? This is the address for this information. I think we're all smart enough to know that when we say address, it doesn't mean, oh, you mean like on a letter, or do you mean like a public address? No. That would be too straightforward. We need universal resource locator to designate this. URL. Okay. So industries tend to have these things, that is this jargon that gets built into them. Don't get thrown off. All right. Okay. Question number 2. What is the difference between the old crisis paradigm and the new crisis paradigm, given the capabilities of the new digital media technology? All right, Candace, you were first on all of these, so we are going to take you first. All right, for this one. As we learned from Tapscott and William, there are several key differences between old crisis paradigm and new ones, given the capability of new digital technologies. First and foremost, new digital technologies provide the opportunity for enhanced collaboration. For instance, Tapscott and William discuss how open source software, healthcare sites, internet itself, all makes it easier to collaborate with others around the globe to resolve crises in a way we have not been able to see before. Second, Tapscott and Williams underscore the old paradigm outlined clear roles and responsibilities, while the new paradigm blurs the line between sectors and institutions. The benefits of these blurred lines is that problems get solved more quickly because organizations, let alone people, do not feel as restricted to their set roles and responsibilities, and instead encouraged to work more collaboratively and resolve the crisis at hand. Alternatively, the lack of clear roles and responsibilities can also have leave organizations unsure of when they should step in or whether they should, and which can prevent a crisis from being resolved at all. Which is an excellent point, Candace, because it's not merely as straightforward as, well, the more people, the merrier. No, not necessarily. For example, there are some really interesting studies about public reaction correlated to crowd size, correlated to emergencies. And I'm sorry to tell you that if you're out in public and you get into trouble, okay, let's say it's a natural occurrence, or so-called, I'm using insurance terms here, man-made. So you have a heart attack or some sort of medical emergency, or someone attacks you. The data suggests the larger the crowd size, the less likely it is that someone is going to come and help you. You are on your own, baby. Okay? And I'm not going to get into the psychology of that right now, but that's what the data points to. A third of the new paradigm, individuals play a much greater role than institutions do in crisis resolution. In fact, because the new paradigm allows for what Tupper Williams described as mass collaboration. They explain this allow for the individual to get more involved in large-scale cultural, political, economic systems, more so than they ever done before. In this way, thanks to digital media technology, individuals can become involved in the shift from institutional to more collaborative crisis. Again, this is a mixed bag. All right, please, as savvy communicators that you are, do not fall into the pit of, well, because it's new, it must be better. No. So it might be better if individuals get involved with crisis response, or it might not, depending on what the crisis is. If the crisis requires a specific and highly trained response, having a mass amount of people rush in, either physically or in a digital space, may not be the best thing. All right, because they don't know what they're doing, and it may be what they do may be counterintuitive to what should be done. Okay, so it beware of the fallacy of the superiority of utilitarianism. And what do I mean by that? That is this idea that a majority opinion is the answer to the question. And interestingly, this was the model that Google was built on. That is, it assumes that the majority answer to whatever the question is the right answer. And in fact, let me see what I have. I've got it here. Yes. To get at the heart of how it is that Google's designed, let me recommend this book, see if I get the reflection on it. It's called The Search: How Google and Its Rivals Rewrote the Rules of Business and Transformed Our Culture, by John Battelle. B-A. Let's see if I can do this. T-T-E-L-L-E. Okay. So this is a history of Larry Page and Sergey Brin, the two inventors of Google, and where they did it, and the underlying assumptions about it. And the underlying assumption, they were academics, and the underlying assumption is that the thing that's cited the most, like academic citations, is the right answer to the query. Well, maybe. All right. If you're asking the question of, say, and I don't mean this in a cheeky way, but let's say that you want to know the question, something straightforward like, what's 2 + 2? Okay. If the majority of people say 4, all right, that's probably right. All right, fine. But very frequently, opinions to questions, answers to questions are highly culturally contextual. So, for example, Google was officially launched in 1998. But let's just assume that it was launched in 1898, not 1998. And someone typed in as a query, are African Americans people. All right, but they wouldn't have used the term African American. They'd use something else. Okay. What would have been the answer? Now, when we 1898, and we're not that far out of the Civil War, and then we consider that in the state of New York, all right, that by 1902, 1904, the Bronx Zoo, the main zoo for New York City, had put a man that was captured in the Congo, a man by the name of Ota Benga, on display in a cage with an orangutan. What might have been the query? I mean, the answer to the query to that question if Google had been launched in 1898 instead of 1998. And if you look into the history of Ota Benga, and that's OtaBenga, one of the things that strikes me as as interesting is that there were people who came to the zoo and saw this person on display, and they were like, we're not, should we be putting guys in cages with animals, and we're not really sure about that. There are people that sort of rubbing their necks. I don't think that's right. And there was a column written and an op-ed written in the New York Times in response, saying, "Oh, come on, look at him. He's happy. He's perfectly fine. He's happier than he was running around the jungle. I mean, we can be sure of that." Really? Did anybody happen to ask Mr. Benga about this? What might have been the majority response to the Google query if that were the question 100 years ago? Highly contextualized, highly dependent. So be careful. All right? Be careful not to fall into this trap that because, newer is better. All right, question number 3. Among the 5 principles of economics can help organizations to thrive in the digital age, which one of the 5 do you believe the organization you work in could benefit it the most? Okay, so this is one of those, what do you think? Excuse me, Ranesh, my department works with many safety net programs, including programs and services for foster children, child care, and senior and adult care with disabilities. The more departments share, the better equipped the public, including stakeholders, industry experts, and concerned community members to protect themselves and provide new solutions to ongoing problems. By opening up the data to the eyes of the world and inviting thousands of researchers outside the company to join global search for solutions, we'll be able to foster relationships and stimulate projects for an innovative tomorrow. So, Ranesh, I agree with you. I'm often amused by the high flying language of Tapscott and Williams. How about we just say, the more information that people have about the operation of any institution, the more likely it is that there's going to be accountability. That is, people saying, "Hey, wait just a doggone second. Why are you doing this?" So, for example, do you know who Mark Cuban is? Okay. He's the owner of the Dallas Mavericks, or at least he was. He's appeared on a television series called Shark Tank. Okay. He created a company called Cost Plus Drugs. That is COSTPLUS, Cost Plus Drugs. And it's a company that enables people that have to get prescriptions to shop, buying them from Mark Cuban's company at a massively reduced rate. Well, how do they do this? First things first, Mark Cuban set this company up and stocked it full of people that ran around digging into and getting the manufactured cost of a given drug. And if you go to the website, Cost Plus Drugs, you'll see a whole bunch of them. All right, these prescription stuff. We're not talking about like illegal stuff. So he hired a whole bunch of people to go around and dig out, even when it was hidden, the cost of these drugs. And then, that is the manufacturing cost. And then He hired a bunch of people to go around and dig out the average cost to you and me, the taker of these drugs, when they're prescribed and you get them from a pharmacy. He's like, yeah, no. I'm gonna provide them here through my website with a 15% markup. In fact, the company loses money, and if you pull up on YouTube Mark Cuban cost plus drugs, and you'll see in a number of interviews, he's like, we lose money. I don't care. I don't care. If I can tap into this technology to give people access to the information that's hidden from them, so and he's got it in for big pharma, and stick it to big pharma, then that's job well done. And it's not listed on the site. This is not a here's what we found. It's just here's where you get a medication at a decent rate. But if you take a look at the numbers and the research that came out when he was setting this company up, they found that most of the time the markup, that is the amount increased to charge to me and you, the drug taker, is anywhere from 200 to 400%. Compare that with 15%. Okay, big difference. So yes, it can be, in this instance, through the use of technology and the dissemination of information, it allows people to say, hey, wait just a doggone second. And through transparencies provides a means by which to put pressure on these companies to stay in business. And I'm sure that's part of Mark Cuban's design, is to put pressure on these companies that you get your prices down or we're going to run you out of business. Okay. All right. Question number 4. In chapter 4, macroeconomics, Tapscott Williams introduced the concept of prosumption. What does this mean, and how is it related to organizational evolutions? Okay, Cheryl, Tapscott Williams provided a great example of presumption. I think you mean prosumption, but that's all right. We love you. In their discussion using web as a platform innovation, Tech shares how local motors open the doors for new collaboration car design, stating that Local Motors is committed to liberating cars to be a platform for this specialty automotive equipment market, which means the innovation process will continue long after the car rolls off the floor. And this is a very interesting model. They open up and say, hey, design buffs, tell us what you think. And this has been applied, a good example, by the way. Good point, Cheryl. This has been applied in other areas. There was a novel that was later turned into a movie starring Matt Damon that was written called The Martian. And if you saw the movie about Matt Damon, it's about a guy in a Mars mission that gets stranded on Mars. Look this up. Look up the book, The Martian, because the guy that wrote the chapters, and then he threw them out there and said, hey, science and tech buffs, tell me in terms of how, and this is a fictional story, how I'm describing this, where I'm getting the technology right and where I'm getting it wrong, and what should it be. And so using this feedback loop from the general public, he wrote this book, which later became a movie, and it's not a bad movie. Okay. So people proactively, those consumers of the product, and they read the book when they were finished, proactively taking part in the design of the product. Now, this goes on sort of kind of with, with places like GoFundMe. The prosumer is not usually taking an active role in the shape and the design and the production of the product, but they are taking an active role in that they're providing funds for said product and design. And those that work on, Kickstarter or GoFundMe do take input from their backers and modify the design or the processes of whatever they're selling. Okay, so that's prosumerism. What you need to know, because you're going to have a midterm exam in the not distant future, in which that might be a question. Okay, everybody. So as I mentioned in the first video, remember that your part 1 for your papers is coming due. Okay, that's in September, and I said midterm examination. I meant final examination. Okay, that will be at the end of the semester, but you need to know things like Prosimmer. Okay. If you have any questions, I'm here for you. I'm here in my office hours, and or if that's just not working for you, I can look at making an appointment to speak with you. All right, everybody. Thank you so very, very much for all your hard work. Have a great rest of the week, and I will see you on Canvas. Bye-bye.